Alright, so in this video what you're going to do is you're going to take basically this scene and we are going to basically paint it, but instead of using Photoshop, we're going to use Mudbox. Mudbox is a great program. Photoshop's really good for doing basically hard surface models, so things that are typically man-made, because usually things that people make are either cubes or cylinders, or they're very primitive like primitives. And you'll notice that like when you do your UVs and stuff, you can basically get a nice UV projection flatly. Anyway, so Photoshop's really good for that. And it's not to say you couldn't use Photoshop to do this as well, but it's much better for like if you're going to do a wall or a floor or furniture or something that's more has flat sides and things like that. Because things that are organic, right? So like this tree is kind of organic, you know, these rocks are, things like that. It's a little bit more difficult to work with. So we're going to use Mudbox for this. Now Mudbox is an Autodesk piece of software, and you can download it for free. So just to kind of cover that real quick, just go to autodesk.com, yada yada yada, and come on internet. Okay, go to menu, go to students and educators, and then you want free software. Oh boy, hit start now. And then you'll see Maya's right here, which is normally we click on. But if you go down here, you'll see all of the software, and then you'll see Mudbox right here. So you're just going to have to click on that, and then it's going to ask you for your login information. You should already have that from doing it for Maya. So you'll have to sign in. Last time I did, it actually asked me to re-verify. So just use 2020, the latest one. That's fine. So when they ask you for the version and all that. So just download it, you know, so on and so forth. Should be relatively straightforward. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to export these out just so you get an idea of how I have this laid out. If I select this and go to the UV editor, you'll see that this is basically just its own piece. I'm not really worried about texturing this because it's not going to really benefit us too much as far as that's concerned. With this, though, I don't know why I clicked out of it. I have the tree UVs looking like this, and then these are here, and if you look, they fit in, so they're kind of atlased. So we're just going to kind of have those in there as well. All right. Now, what you could do is export one at a time, work on them one at a time, or you could grab them all together and treat it like one big one. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to export these pieces out and then bring them into Mudbox, because that'll just give us more flexibility. Now, if you installed Mudbox at the same time, it might be a plugin too, I'm not sure. You'll see over here there's this section that says send to Unity or send to Unreal. There's another one that'll say send to Mudbox. I still don't like using that, so if you have that as an option, that it does exist. You might have to turn it on some way. You could look it up. I don't like doing it anyway, so I'm not going to bother. But just be aware that's, you know, something. So what you're going to want to do is export out. This is OBJs, and again, Windows, Settings, Preferences, go to Plugin Manager and look for OBJ Export. Just make sure that's turned on. Should be turned on from the last assignment. So what we're going to do is we're just going to export out each one of these as individual things. So I'm going to select this and just do File, Export, Selection. And I'm just going to go ahead, and I have this saved as Hilltop. Where's Hilltop? Hill Maya. And I'm just going to save it right into my Scenes folder. And I'm just going to make sure that it's on OBJ. And I like to turn everything off just so that it's not sending me any extra stuff. Like I don't need the materials and all that other business. And we'll just call this Hill to Mud. Okay. And I'm going to select, we'll do the two rocks at the same time. So let's see. Can I hit G? Oh, sweet. I'm just going to hit G, and that will automatically do the same thing. And we'll just call this Rocks to Mud, because we're going to Mudbox. And then I'll select this and hit G to repeat the last thing. And this will be Tree to Mud. Export selection. And then, so if you've ever modeled trees, a lot of times what they'll do is actually, in video games and even inside of paint effects trees and stuff, the tree is not usually one piece of geometry, unless it's a hero tree, meaning it's a tree that you look close up and it's like it has a role in like a movie or something. Typically, it's just a bunch of tubes stuck into each other. They're not one big piece of geometry. So I did the base of the tree as one piece of geometry, but then these supporting branches, because they're small, I just stuck those on because no one's going to notice. Because they're so small, I'm just going to throw a generic material on there, and as long as it matches close enough, no one's going to know the difference. So I'm going to select this and hit G, and we'll just call this branches to mud. Boom. Okay. So now we can open up Mudbox. So I'm just going to do Mudbox. Now, when you open up Mudbox for the first time, it's going to ask you what you want to use for your default settings. Just go ahead and use the Maya ones. Mudbox has its own. You can also switch it to 3D Studio Max. Might have some other ones too. I'm not sure. Okay. So let's. So it's going to ask me what do I want to do. So I'm just going to close that. Okay. I think. Let me see. Windows. Where is that? The option to change it is in here. It might be hotkeys. Is this it? Here we go. So use shortcuts for Maya. So you can change it here if you're used to a different piece of software, but I would just suggest Maya because I already know that. Maya is sort of standard. And if you want to see what the hotkeys are for all the different things, they're also in here as well. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to import our objects into this. So you just do File and Import, and we're going to go right to our Maya project folder. So where are you, Hill? I really gotta H-I-J-K-I. Here we go. I really gotta clean this up. So I'll go to Scenes, and I'm just gonna go ahead and we'll start with the hill to mud. Okay. Boom, and then File, Import, and can I do multiples? I can. Okay. So just select them all and import. I already did hill. Okay. Oop. Okay. So now all of our things are in there. So ta-da. Now, we are in the Mudbox. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and save this just so everything's in there. So Control S. There it goes. And yep, we'll save it right to the scenes file. And I'm just going to go ahead and save it as a Mudbox file. And I'll just call this like Hilltop Texturing. Okay. Alright, so this is the Mudbox. Basically, what this program allows you to do is it works through subdivision, and it will allow you to sculpt and to paint. Okay, you might have used this before. We're just going to use it on these because it's particularly good, and it's easier to work directly on the model in 3D here. Okay, we will use other programs later on, but Mudbox is pretty good in particular for that. Okay, so this is the interface. File like you'd expect. Edit. You can look at these various things. For the most part, we aren't going to use any of this up here. That's not really going to help us too much. Let's look over here, actually. So, if you look, we have three main tabs here. So we have Viewport Filters, which honestly don't really do much. They basically, you might as well think of it as like Instagram. So, like, there's this depth of field, which you can adjust. Let me select it. I can adjust the depth of field. Let me see. Oh, whoops, sorry. We'll leave that one. It's the focus distance. So if I wanted to like have it that some things aren't focused and other things aren't, you know, they have an ambient occlusion one where it'll add the ambient occlusion, which we kind of used last time. Normal nap. What's screen? Screen distance. So basically like an alpha Z map thing. You don't really need it, so you can just ignore that. Object list. Now this is basically like the outliner would be inside of Maya. It more or less gives you a list of all the things that are in here. So we have perspective, top, side, front, like you would expect. If for some reason you want to switch to a specific view, you can use this to click to, which is fine. If that helps, there's this little cube. You can also click on here, right click and click look through, and it'll give you like a nice like, or is this orthographic? I can't tell. Doesn't look it. I'll just keep it on here. So I'm just going to right click, look through. So we have our cameras. We have a light here. All right, and so you can adjust the lighting here to some degree. I don't know if you can. No. Yada yada. There's the default material, which is currently what everything has on it, and then we have our meshes right here that we brought in. Okay. So you can see that's our layout, so that's somewhat useful. Then we have layers, and basically there are, like I said, there's two things that this is meant to do. You don't really make geometry in here, like there's no extrusions or anything like that. They've added some things to sculpt and dynamically tessellate the model, as well as retopologize, but honestly, there's other programs that do it better that I would suggest using. So notice I have this mesh selected, so that's the same thing as doing it through this. I can select objects this way, right? But that's kind of annoying. I can use the object click off, or if I'm in that object mode and I have one clicked on here, if I just hold control and click, you know, because controls, I can unselect it that way too. So anyway, yeah, so that's our objects. So layers, basically there's two things. It does sculpting and it does painting, okay? So there's a paint section and a sculpt section. So usually what you do is you do the sculpt first, and I'll show you how to use that in a little bit. Then when you're done with that, you're going to switch gears, and then you'll have layers. You have layers in here too, and then you'll have layers in here for painting. And it's very similar to kind of like a Photoshop sort of scenario, all right? So that's what this panel's for. This panel also contains the tool information. So, for instance, if I go to like sculpt here, you can see down here, this is all the information in regards to the tool. So brush size, strength, whether it's mirroring, all this stuff here that could possibly be useful to you, okay? So basically this is like the properties panel, if you will, of whatever you have selected, be it any one of these things, so on and so forth, okay? So a great deal of information is over here of what we're going to be doing. Now on the bottom is more or less the toolbar, and that's going to give you your tools. So we got sculpt tools, and they're pretty self-explanatory. So we got sculpt, which will push or pull depending on what button we hit, but basically it'll add or subtract. Smooth, which you don't really need to use because if you hold shift, that's smooth. There's relax, which is kind of like smooth, but it spaces it out instead. Relax is really nice. There's grab, which is like you can move it, right? Or snake hook, I think they call it in the other ones, in Blender. Pinch, flat, you can see them, right? So they do all these different things, and we can kind of get into this a little bit later. The paint tools you're going to use when you're in the paint section, right? Makes sense. And there's a bunch of paint tools here. Again, I will show you these when we get to them, but for now we're going to leave that alone. Curve tools, we're not going to need. Basically, these are used for, actually, if you hover over them too, it will tell you stuff about it. This is used for if you want to draw a curve so that you can use it to draw on, or also for retopology. So when we say retopology, basically we can contort this and make this however we want, regardless of what the geometry looks like, what the grid is, the edge flow. And then it will retopologize it. But if we use these curves, these different curve tools, it will help guide that retopology. We're not going to use this either. There's pose tools, which are kind of neat, and it's good for like moving an object. Like let's say I wanted this tree to be bent a little bit more. I could use that create joint. You click and then kind of drag like that. All right, and then I can use this pose, and then you click on it, and then you can kind of like rotate it around. Woo! Right? So it's useful, I guess, to kind of like if you need to like bend stuff around. Okay? And then the select move tools, which I already kind of showed you before, so you can select faces and objects and stuff like that. Okay? And then move and rotate. Kind of your typical things you would see like as your bare bones Maya stuff, right? Also, just so you know too, when you're in these tools, if you hit 1, 2, 3, 4, they match up to whatever is down here. If I'm on here, 1, 2, 3, 4, just so you know, that might be useful. Then over here, we have our stamp stencils, blah, 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 blah. So these are things that can be used generally in conjunction with this. So I could use the sculpt and then use the stamp. And the stamp would be the same thing as having an alpha on top of, like when you're in Photoshop and you're using your brush and the brush has an alpha. So it like, when you draw a thing, it'll make repeating like flames or leaves or whatever, right? That's basically what the stamp is. Stencil is a similar idea, but what it'll do is it'll make it pop up here, and then you will sculpt or paint through it. So it'll like hold it up, and then you're using that as a guide, kind of. It will imprint it where you draw your stroke, which is pretty useful. Fall off. This is more or less the brush fall off, I guess. Basically, like if I did this one, I'd have a really sharp brush. This would be really rounded. This would be completely straight, like if I was using a chalk liner or like a piece of chalk. Materials. So these are material presets. Right now, these all have this. Where is it? This one. This default material, right? Yeah. But you can click any one of these, and then they will have these various materials. But they're pretty much the same thing. It's just that they have these pre-made settings. most of the time what I tell people to do, be it this program or another, is either use whatever the default material is or whatever the ugliest material is, which I know sounds counterintuitive. But the thing is, like, if I use this material, this looks cool no matter what, right? If you hit W, it's wireframe, by the way, which is also up here. So where's it? Display. And you can, if you want to adjust any of your display settings, like you want things to show, so there's wireframe, flat lighting. If you want it not smooth shaded so you can see all of the faces, you can do that there. So it's up to you what you want to do. But, right, no matter what, this looks cool, right? So that's, but the thing is, like, it might look cool here, but you want to make it look good with it in the worst case scenario. So then when you add you want to make a really good cake so that you put, like, nice frosting on it. That's a really good cake. If you make a bad cake, you can put, like, amazing frosting on there, but it ain't going to save your cake. Like, it's still going to be a crappy cake. So, generally speaking, use, like, either the ugliest or the most kind of bare bones material. And so in this case, it's this default. And then there's lighting presets, which, are any of these called default? I don't think any of them are. Don't use any of these because, again, there's a default one. So if I click on that, let me see something. See? Crap. That's why I didn't want to do that. Cancel. Let me go back to select faces, unselect. All right, well, say don't click on it because then you're stuck with whatever the lighting is. Because yeah, I know, I just tried to undo it, it wouldn't work. You get kind of stuck with that lighting. And the thing is, like, some of these, man, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, that's just makes it look cool. So you want to use the worst lighting possible, okay? Again, for the same reason. And also in a more kind of general all-over lighting so that you can see any errors you might have. So we're going to keep the lighting there. Never used this camera bookmarks thing, so we're just going to ignore that. I don't think that's really all that useful. I mean, if you really need a bookmark, I think you'd be using the orthographic or the front side top views. You know what I mean? There's no real reason to use that. So that's a general overview of the model and what have you. Okay. So one of the things I want to do is I'm going to go to this object list, and right now everything has that default material, which is fine. That's what I want it to have. But the problem with that is, well, I'll show you. So let's say I go to paint real quick here. Don't do this. I'm just showing you. I'm just going to add a new layer. I'm just going to make it diffuse. I'm going to go to paint tools, and I'm just going to hit B. So watch. Whoop. And let's see. You see what happened here? Because they're all sharing, and it should be on the rock somewhere. There you go. Because they're all sharing the same UVs, the same material, that they're over top of each other. So if I go to the UV view, like there's that object, right? But if you look, you can see where that line of stroke is. So let's say I go to this one, see where it is over these branches. There's what it is over the rocks, and there where it is over there. So these are all in that same UV space. So they all need a different material. Otherwise, or at least the a couple of them need a different material. So that the rock and the these can share the same material because they're not overlapping each other, so that's fine. Where's the other rock? This one? I'm only seeing. Oh, there they are. Okay. So wait, this and this. Well, anyway, these two are fine to have their own, but the other ones need to not have that. Okay, so that's why you don't. We gotta basically assign new materials. We're just gonna kind of set. God bless it. I can't. Why are you not undoing the stroke? Oh, because I did all those selections. Let's undo the stroke real quick. Just want to see. Let's see. Oh, good. Okay. So what I'm going to do first is just go ahead and on that object list, we're just going to apply materials to these various things. So this one, we're just going to right click and we're going to assign a new material. Now you'll see there's Mudbox Material and then there's these other ones. Don't use these other ones because they won't let you paint on them. Just go ahead and do Mudbox Material. And then we'll just call this like hill underscore MAT. Or actually, we'll call it ground. Ground underscore MAT. And the diffuse currently is that. Let's just go ahead and give it like a generic green color. Like that. And done. And specular. Let's just do a really dark gray because it have a little bit. That's all fine. And then we'll just hit good. And done. Okay. And a little bit. Oh, because it's selected. I'm like, why is it so flat? All right. So then we're going to select these, and These also should have a different material, so let's go ahead and assign a new material, another Mudbox material, and we'll call this, it is possible also to create these, and then if you select the objects and you click on these materials, they'll replace the material that we're making right now. But again, I kind of want it to be ugly, so I'm kind of cool with that, and we'll just call this branches underscore MET. And then for the diffuse, I don't really know what color thing I'm going to do yet. I don't really care. It's just as a guide. And then we'll just again do that. Okay, and we'll close that out. That's fine. And then this and this, these can have the same materials. So we'll assign a new material to these, Mudbox material, and we'll just call this tree rocks underscore MET. And I really don't care. I'm just gonna, because these are the ones I'm actually gonna paint. I'm just gonna do a default gray, and then for the specular, I'm gonna do kind of a dark gray too. So they have a little bit of both. They kind of can go either way. And then I'm just gonna control click, good. All right. So they've now got their own stuff going on there. Okay, so that's good. So what I want to do is basically sculpt these first, and then once they're sculpted, we can go through and texture them. Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll bake those results and we'll send it back to Maya, and then we'll have a nice little scene thing here. But as far as I'm concerned, I think we got everything kind of set up. Let me just Control S to save this again, or File, Save Scene. Didn't see anything happen. I'm hoping it saved. But there's a good rough overview of what Mudbox is. I don't really need the wireframe. Where's that grid? What the kind of the setup and what it looks like, and then the next thing we'll actually start doing stuff in here. I really like this program, not because it's the most powerful. There's definitely programs that are more powerful than this. I mean, it's decent. I mean, it's powerful, but more just because of the ease of use. You can kind of look at it and figure it out if you've used any other 3D programs, and that's, I think, really where its strength is. Okay, so we'll end this video. In the next one, I'm going to start sculpting away.